Time for another Bearded Wonder Explains. This time we're looking at third parties and really all political parties. So, what is a political party? Why do they exist? Why do they keep interrupting my television programming to tell me why I should hate somebody else who also wants the same job that they do? Well, the first thing that most people don't understand or realize is that the political parties are not a part of our government. They are technically part of the people. So they are private organizations. They can do whatever they want. So nothing forces them to believe one thing or another, to vote a certain kind of way or anything like that. They get to control that themselves. They build these things that they call platforms. And as you can see in the political cartoon here, those platforms are built by specific policies, specific ideas. And so, for example, if you're a citizen and you're trying to figure out who to vote for, and you know they both kind of look the same to you, as far as just looking from the outside, so you're like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Well, those platforms are basically like, if you're a part of that party or that party, that you can kind of evaluate their ideas. So I can look at this one and see what they say about immigration, and then I can see what these ones say about immigration, and then I can make a choice. And by the way, immigration is just one example. They usually have 20 or 30 things that they say they care about. And so generally speaking, if you're a Republican, you agree with most Republicans on most things. That doesn't mean 100%. You can still vote different ways. We call that bipartisan, which means two parties. And that means people are working together. Now let's look at a history of the parties to see where our parties came from. Well, George Washington didn't have a party. If he did, it would be the Federalist Party. But very quickly, there was a kind of a battle over who gets to use the term Federalist, whether it was Alexander Hamilton and the people that wanted a strong national government. They said that's the federal government, the national government, and so we are the Federalist Party. And Thomas Jefferson and James Madison and others said, no, we need strong state governments. Not too strong, they were more of a middle ground kind of a perspective. But they didn't want to be anti-federalist because that sounds negative, and nobody wants to be negative in an election. So they wanted to not be anti-federalists, but ultimately they lost that name game, and so they changed their name to the Democrat-Republican Party. And that's what we call the era of good feelings from about 1800 when Thomas Jefferson becomes president. You've got about 20 years there where they kind of dominate politics. They win pretty much everything. Well, the Democrat-Republican Party splits in the late 1820s with Andrew Jackson over the tariffs. Andrew Jackson tries to get rid of the tariffs, and there are other people that kind of want the tariffs. Ultimately, the Democrat Party comes to oppose tariffs, and so we would kind of consider them to be on the strong state government side. Meanwhile, the Whigs kind of move more in the opposite direction and become more like the Federalists from the previous era. And so they both kind of move back towards, away from the center, if you will. The Whig Party dies in the election of 1856, actually. And so in 1860, Abraham Lincoln creates a new political party, or the people around him and Lincoln create the Republican Party. And that is supportive of a strong national government. Generally speaking, they are the Union people. And then we have the Democrat Party in the South. In many of those states, like South Carolina, you couldn't even see Abraham Lincoln's name on the ballot. They refused to put a Republican on the ballots for voting for president. And so we have that. After the war between the states, when we get back into Reconstruction, both parties are going to kind of move more back to the middle. And so we're going to have kind of like this, listen, when we got too far apart, we ended up with a war. And so let's just kind of find that middle ground. The Republicans still more on the national side, the Democrats still more on the state side, but definitely closer to each other than they were. They're going to be pulled in opposite directions by a group of third parties in the late 1800s and early 1900s called the Populists and the Progressives. And so basically the Progressives end up winning out in the end. And so they are going to pull both the Democrat Party and the Republican Party, although not as much the Republicans, towards that big government side, to the point where actually the Progressives split out of the Republican Party for a little bit and run a third party candidate. Ultimately, that is unsuccessful. Our Progressive Party goes away. But kind of, if you're looking at a legacy kind of perspective, the Democrat Party has shifted significantly during this progressive and reconstructive era. And it goes even further under FDR, Franklin D. Roosevelt, in the Great Depression. Basically, he argues that it's the government's job to take care of everybody. Everybody's hurting, so we're going to provide social services, we're going to provide retirement, we're going to provide all of that through the government. And the Republican Party kind of moves a little bit towards the strong national side as well. The problem is that that big government perspective doesn't give segregationists anywhere to go. And so they're actually going to split out of the Democrat Party and create their own party called the Dixiecrat Party. And the Dixiecrats basically were a one-issue kind of a thing. They supported strong state governments because they wanted segregation in the South, and that's what their goal was. Well, the Democrats kind of leave them behind, and the Republicans aren't really with their program either, but the Republicans realize after World War II that if they move a little bit towards the Dixiecrats, that maybe they can steal all of their votes. And that's what happens in the late 1960s. Richard Nixon kind of realizes that if he starts talking about states' rights a little bit, by the way, not to support segregation, but if he supports it a little bit, the people who do support segregation might vote for him anyway. And that's what they do. And so the Republican Party kind of steals their votes without really shifting towards their perspective. Later in the 1980s, now totally disconnected from the issue of segregation, we have the neoconservative Republican Party that's under Ronald Reagan. And they kind of shift more to the right towards reducing the role of the national government. They actually kind of forced the Democrats to do the same. Bill Clinton's a good example of this. When he was president in 1992 and 1996, he really kind of used a lot of non-national government arguments, kind of reduced a lot of what the national government did. After that point, in post 9/11, we have what we're going to call the post 9/11 Republican Party. This is under George W. Bush. He kind of moves them back towards that strong national government, this time for defense purposes. And then under Obama, we also have that Democrat Party moving back to a very strong national government perspective. With Obamacare, which is basically saying that it is the national government's job to provide health care to every person. And so that's kind of a history of the political parties, how they go from Federalists and Anti-Federalists to the parties that we have today, and also kind of shows you where our parties today kind of fit in this kind of ongoing conflict between a strong national government and a strong state government. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you learned something and you have a great day.